Bruins Beat is brought to you by PrizePicks.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by PrizePicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Of course, we're presented by CLNS Media as well. Make sure to subscribe to Bruins Rinkside on YouTube. Lots of great stuff we're doing there. Make sure if you don't like watching us and you just like listening, of course, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts from. Lots of other great stuff at CLNS as well. I'm Evan Marinofsky, joined today by Bruins Network, Anthony Kwetkowski. Anthony, what is up?
Just another day, just trying to get through this week, shortened week, and just trying to talk some prospects with my friend Evan.
Damn right. Damn right. Nothing better than that. That's a hell of a way to ring in the holiday season and the Christmas time. It's an interesting time for prospects because most have been playing since mid to late September. So we have about 2 months to go off of what they've been doing and what you've been seeing. And we'll start with BC because, where else would we start? Have to start at BC. Basically, the Bruins 2.0, or Bruins Light, excuse me. James Hagens. Interesting case. 13 points in 13 games. Has been moved to the wing recently. Wasn't as dominant as center, at least to start. But I do think there's a lot with that BC team. Not as good as years past. Revolving door on his lines. He's playing with multiple different players. What do you make of his season so far?
I mean, yeah, I think there's two ways of looking at it, right? And one of them is, like you just said, like 13 points in 13 games. That's the same pace as he had at, D+0 year. This is his D+1 year. You would kind of want that to be elevated much more at this point. Maybe something like 1.5 points per game, 1.25 points per game. Maybe something like 16 points in 12 games, something around that threshold. But I think for, Hagen specifically, like you said, is a pretty interesting use case in terms of what's going on at BC. They lost a lot of high-end talent. You could argue they lost their highest end talent in Ryan Leonard last year. They lost Gabe Perreault as well. And they've also had injuries. Oscar Yelvik has been out, another Bruins prospect. Andre Gasso has been out, another pretty big contributor in their lineup from top to bottom, plays all three strengths, power play, PK, and 5-on-5. So for them to have, such a massive leader kind of, take the back seat to injury and not be available, that starts to start a ripple effect throughout the rest of the lineup. But for Hagens himself, I tell people all the time, I know it sounds cliche, and I know it sounds like people should be, you know, kind of brushing it off at this point in a little bit, but watch the games, watch the player, watch what he does, watch what he does when he has the puck. Some nights he's rushing it a little bit, and I'm sure that's frustrating for him and also his line mates. But a lot of the times, what I see with Hagens is a lot of a lot of points to be left on the table for his line mates. A lot of chances that have been created that have gone unanswered. A lot of good shots that something that you have said yourself here. He's working on his shot, and he's working on kind of rounding out his toolkit to more NHL caliber, which is not really a deficiency of his per se for his shot, but his strong suit has been his playmaking, his skating, his vision, his kind of ability to pass for his line mates and set them up with opportunities. Now he's kind of in the driver's seat of, hey, I have an open lane. I'm going to take the space in front of me. I'm going to deke a defenseman, or I'm going to just take what's already there and I'm going to shoot. Whether it's at the chest, whether it's, trying to pick corners, whether it's shooting for a rebound, that's more kind of, the puzzle that's being pieced together with Hagens. But he's doing a lot. He's beating defenders wide, he's beating them small, he's beating them, in the small ice areas around the circles, around the crease, around the hashes. And he's also carrying in transition like he's so very good at. He's gaining the line, he's gaining the zone, he's going end to end with the puck. And I posted a clip on Twitter that you actually retweeted. This is a week ago from when we're recording right now, but you see his line mates are kind of crowding him. Teddy Stiga, who's a very good two-way player, very fast player, very up-tempo player, crowding him, kind of, you know, you'll see them kind of gain the line at one point when Higgins has the puck on his stick and both of his wingers converge on where he is, and it kind of squashes the play, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing a lot of. And to your point earlier, we might be seeing kind of the outcome of that, which is Hagens getting moved to wing in order to get Stiga playing up to his standard again, which he hasn't been this season. And I like him as a player, but something there isn't really gelling right, and it hasn't been. But the main point that I'm trying to make with Hagens is I personally think that he has been doing a lot. He's been doing more than his fair share of heavy lifting. And if he had, the talent level that he had around him last year in Leonard and Perot, I think he would have had a much hotter start this year in terms of the points. And you'd be looking at him and be like, wow, like that is definitely the seventh overall pick. But again, you have a lot of roster turnover, a lot of guys who are trying to step into roles that they weren't playing last year in terms of leadership and carrying more weight of the load. And I personally think Hagens has been doing just fine in that department.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Hagens because it's like, I went into this year being like, I want to see him, you mentioned it earlier, jump to the 1.5 points per game mark or around
Right.
1.2. And he still could, by the way. Like, it's, we're still relatively early in the season. But I do think, as you said, that the talent isn't there like it was last season around him. And through watching the game, through seeing your clips online as well, like there is a lot of skill there. There's a lot of playmaking that is still there. That either the puck goes in the neutral zone, someone misses a pass, like little things like that. That what my takeaway is like when you put him with NHL line mates, whether it's with David Pastrnak next year, whether it's with Morgan Geekie, whether it's with I almost said Victor Arvidsson. I think people would be pretty pissed
I
if
hope we're
Victor
not
Arvidsson
talking
was
about him
back
next year.
next year. If you put him with Victor Arvidsson and Casey Middlestat, and you'll get the best possible James Hagens. But if you put him with NHL line mates, those chances are probably going to be finished. Now, defensively, the defense is going to be better because it's the NHL. But that's why I
Right.
am so curious with Hagens when he gets to the NHL, because when you put him with good line mates, what is he going to be able to be? And my thing is like, I get why they put him at wing at BC because they want to get the offense going. They want to get things moving. Again, you mentioned Stiga. That's 100% a part of it. But I also want to see him develop as a center, right? Like
Same.
if he becomes a wing in the NHL, fine. Like that's a top 6 wing, you're completely fine with that. But I want to see him be a center now. I want him starting out as a center in pro hockey, whether that's in Providence or most likely Boston. That's my
Right.
one little thing with him where I'm like, oh, I want to see him doing this down the middle because in a regular shift, he plays like a center
He
oftentimes. He
does. He
plays like a
does.
center and he's
Yeah.
driving the line and he's pushing the pace. But I would like to see that done down the middle. I would like to see him improving on his face-offs and things like that. So that's sort of the one thing where like I would like to see him move back to the middle of the ice for the rest of the season.
Right. And
And I
and
don't know if that's going to
to
happen.
it, I think it will. Like you were saying, like he assumes the role of center anyways. And if you watch him, like you look at the line chart, of his line, it's him on the left wing and Stiga, even on the nights that it is him at center. Hagens is the center. Like, make no mistake about it. Stiga might be taking faceoffs in the offensive zone. Like I've seen that plenty of times. But when Hagens has the puck, he's in the center of the ice. He has two wingers. He is the one in the center. And then even when he's, playing wing, like he's still taking faceoffs for the night. Like you can go check the box score. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like a weird hybrid role that he's in. And I think a lot of that is, like we were just saying, Stiga has not been himself. He's playing too fast. He's, rushing opportunities. He's kind of playing all or nothing. And when you have a player like Hagens who's at center, you have to be a little more, aware of your surroundings there. It's not like
Defer.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like a Ryan Leonard type situation where you can just expect that the puck's going to hit you on the stick and you can go 15 miles an hour into the goalie from 2 feet away. Like you can't really do that when you're not Leonard. So if you're just taking it down main every shift and you're expecting someone else to be around you doing, everything else, it messes with the workflow of the line, and I think that's what we're seeing. So I agree. I think they need to have him develop as a center. And listen, even if he ends up becoming a Matt Barzal type player who is not good at the dot, and you end up having to get a Bo Horvat later down the line to be that player for you, that's fine. Like operate the middle of the ice, take the draws. I would rather see Hagens be a 42% face-off guy and a good play driving center than be a top six winger because the Bruins look at him and say, hey, you're not a center because you can't be that two-way presence that we need. You got to get past that, I think. And when you're taking the player that Hagens is in the draft and you're taking a consensus top three talent in the draft, you got to let him play his game. And I hope that's I hope that's what we're talking about here next year as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. By the way, a little Stiga thought I've had recently. I've been watching Stiga for a long time.
Yeah, you watched him
I
what, the last 5 years
Well, not 5 years. Like
plus?
I came in after he was at Bell Hill, so like NTDP and things like that. So not I didn't watch him
Okay.
with the Eagles and Bell Hill. But what I will say is, for those who don't know, Stiga's a Nashville second rounder from last year. Had a phenomenal freshman year. I think I've figured out his NHL equivalent. I think I've figured out his NHL. Probably ceiling. Pavel
Let's hear it.
Zacha. I think it's Pavel
Okay.
Zacha. I think Pavel Zacha, like wing, center, can play any situation, can jump on a power play, can kill a penalty. Like, I think Stiga has that. I think that's like Teddy Stiga at the next level. I know we're not a Predators podcast, but like as I was watching him the other night, it like a light went off. I was like, that's it. It's Zacha.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
think
And
that for him would be a good like that's a great turnout for Nashville if that ends up
yeah,
happening.
stylistically, I mean, you're right there, especially, and something that if you watch Zaka a lot, and I assume most people who are listening to this podcast do, you'll
Yes.
you'll notice he's pretty good at pulling pucks away from the wall and bringing them to center ice or bringing them out high or bringing them into dangerous areas. Whether it be pivoting with his skates or actually taking the puck and making one simple move. Like he's very efficient that way. Stiga's been doing that very well, and I think you know I don't want that to get lost in translation either with the Hagens kind of dilemma there, but Stiga has been good at that, and he definitely opens up space for Hagens and his line mates when he's doing it. It's just the pace seems to be something that he's struggling with right now, and kind of like where he should be in terms of his line mates. So, yeah, I think that's actually a pretty good comp.
Yeah, it hit me in the night. I was like, I like that. That's it feels
Yeah,
right
we'll
to me.
run
That's
with
that
that.
kind of player. We'll run with that. We'll see if that ends up happening. Keeping it with BC. Dean Letourneau, 11 points in 13 games. You and I were messaging the other day, and I kept saying last year, and I know you did the same thing. Like, this is a project. One
Yep.
year in, yes, it was a bad year last year, but jumping from prep to Hockey East, Division One college hockey, national championship contending hockey. That's a
Yeah.
huge. I don't think people realize how big it is going from U18 to freaking Division One. And yeah, no goals, 3 assists, looked lost out there at times. He's been fantastic this year. And I'm not sitting here being like he's a massive success. What a hit. It's more so just like don't get ahead of yourself. Like he's on
Yeah.
the right he's on the right development path finally, and the dividends have been good. He's been really good this season, all things considered.
I would argue that Letourneau has been BC's second best player behind Hagens. And that's not even just from the fact that, I'm Bruins Network and not Nashville Network or Predators Network. I think I wouldn't want to be Predators
Let's not
Network
be
anyways.
Predators
Yeah.
Network, Anthony.
So not my finest potential Twitter handle there.
That's their
So
fault. That's having that stupid
that
name. That's
that's
lends itself
a
up. Predators
that's
Beat.
a it's a pretty tough
Hosted by
draw.
Chris. It's hosted by Chris Hansen. Anthony. That would be me.
Yeah,
Hosted by
not
Chris
good.
Hansen.
I don't want to be in that chair, so hopefully we won't
No,
be.
no.
So you look at Letourneau, and like you said, last year, and something that you just kind of specifically stated was he's on the right development path finally. You can look at that one of two ways, and one of them is yes, he should have been in the USHL, and that's absolutely valid. And I think even Don Sweeney himself said that. But the second way of looking at that is the way that I look at it is, let's say that Letourneau was in the USHL last year, and this was now his freshman year at BC. Would he have had the same start that he has now? Would he have had the same scoring, kind of prowess? Would he have had the same confidence? Would he have known the pace and the kind of physical rigors of NCAA hockey that he needs in order to be successful right out of the gate? You can argue that the struggle that he faced last year and knowing it by being thrown into the fire, that he was forged this year to know exactly what was expected of him, what he needed to be. And I think in the long run, you're kind of seeing a glimpse of that paying off. Like his coach put him in those tough positions, tough minutes, didn't really healthy scratch him at all. And the worst of it was playing fourth line center. Like that's not an easy role, especially for, Greg Brown putting him in those kind of tertiary, roles where you're playing second and third fiddle to everyone else, but you're playing every night. You're asked to play, 5-on-5 defensive zone faceoffs. You're asked to play a defensive role in the penalty kill when you're out there. You're asked to play power play to net front. I mean, you're in the practices with these guys. You're going up against Ryan Leonard in scrimmages. You're going up against Gabe Perreault, and you're going up against Andre Gassot and Oscar Yelvik, and you're going up against James Hagens. Like you're not going up against those guys every night in the USHL. You're not even going up against them in practice. And so yeah, I think the game speed would have definitely brought him way up to tempo faster playing in the USHL. Um, but I think playing against men in college who are, you know, average age of probably what, 23 years old, you figure, and they're 6 foot plus and 200 pounds, like, yeah, that probably paid off for him because that's ultimately where you want to be good, right? And we saw the same thing in terms of another Bruins prospect years and years and years ago with Mason Lohrei. The
Mhm.
conversation when he was dominating the USHL was, oh, well, he's 6'4" and he's, already played in the USHL. He should be dominating these guys. Well, no one should be dominating anyone anywhere. That's something that you have to do. So for Letourneau, like by that same standard, if he played in the USHL last year and dominated it, and then came out this year and he's got, half a point per game instead of a point per game, like you would look at that as, oh, okay, that's year one of the project. Well, now we're in year two of the project. He's a sophomore instead of a freshman, and he's already a point per game player. He's already the driver of his second line. He's center, he's wing, he's taking the defensive zone draws, offensive zone draws. He's shooting everywhere. He leads the team in shots on goal. Anytime he gets the opportunity, he's shooting, and it's not like they're, little flub shots here and there or taking a long time to get him off. No, he's laying into him and he's shooting and he's reaping those rewards. And that's another player that you can look at and say, wow, Letourneau could actually have more points than he has now, which is a pretty impressive thought. You can go look at my Twitter and you'll see various instances of him carrying the puck for his line mates and passing, and it either gets saved or his shot gets saved. And playing against Maine is a great example. You're playing against what, one of the best, if not the best goaltender in the last 2 seasons of NCAA hockey. You're scoring on him. You're beating him shoulder high and going bar down off the face off. Like you got to keep in mind that a lot of people who are frustrated about like what you were saying, his bad year last year and 3 points in 36 games, like I get it. But you also have to understand that Letourneau wasn't drafted to be John Beecher, okay? He wasn't drafted to be Trent Frederick. Like, we have to get that out of our minds when we talk about Team Letourneau. He was what a lot of people have been clamoring for the Bruins to do, is draft a high skill player. Like, he had 120 points in 50 games for a reason in prep school. The big knock on him is he a 6'8" type player who's playing to that stature? And a lot of times he hadn't been. He was kind of playing like he was 8 inches smaller than he is. And that drives me crazy at times too, because it's like, dude, you are 230 pounds and you're 6'8". If a guy's next to you, bury him. If you're
Yep.
standing in
Use
front of the
it.
crease, yeah, if you're standing in front of the crease in the power play and someone's like kind of pushing you out with their stick, bury him. Like stand your ground. And we saw that too. I don't know if I tweeted it yet, and if not, by the time you hear this podcast, you'll see it. Um, last game or 2 games ago, Letourneau comes in. He gets buried up against the far wall in front of the penalty boxes in the neutral zone. He takes a hit to move the puck from a 5'10" or 5'11" player, gets right back up, comes back in, lays into a shot in front of the hash marks, and on his way through, absolutely buries a guy in front of him. Just buries a poor, unassuming defender. And he hit him pretty hard, and he cross-checked him essentially. No call, but that's what you want to see, right? Like You want to see a guy of that stature use it or lose it. And that's what you have to do. You don't want him to be a kind of Cousins or Paul type player even a Justin Brazeau. Like you don't want to see him be this kind of bigger, skilled guy who's not using his tools to the best of his ability. If you see a guy in front of you and you have the opportunity, bury him. And that's what we're seeing Letourneau do this year. Like he's not shying away from contact. He's not shying away from finishing those checks or going out of his way. And neither is James Hagens. While we're on that subject, I mean, he's been kind of got that dog in him a little bit, and
He has. He's been more
it seems to
physical, which is
be,
good.
yeah, and it seems to be something that's infectious with the team, and I hope Letourneau keeps continuing down that path because if you're going to be a power center type who relies on his skill, you can get you can get way further in the NHL if you're using that physicality with it too, instead of just being a skill guy. We see it all the time. And a lot of guys who come up short are the bigger guys who aren't using their skill and not using their size. He's got both in spades. And he's been, like I said, BC's second best player. And I don't think a lot of people had that even as a possibility looking back at last year.
No, they didn't. I want to go back to the point you made about his development path, because it's an interesting look. And I hear this a lot of
Right.
times when people say, "Hey, it's good for you to go to the higher level because you're practicing against those guys all the time, and it's good because you're getting used to the team and the pace when you do jump into games." I still do believe that being in the USHL would have been more helpful for him. I think it's a percentages game. I think that you kind of want to go where the higher percentages are. And I think it is better for kids to have that in between, which is the USHL. Then you jump to college and then you can have your freshman year and everything. But you're right. And the other thing is there are a lot of kids, though, who this path would not have worked for. There are a lot of kids who would have
Right.
been crushed by that last year. And it would have been like, holy crap, I'm not that good. This is, mentally, this is really screwing me. But credit to him, not the case. Credit to him. I mean, what
No.
he's been year one to year two has been fantastic. So like it's 100% worked for him. Now, if I was an agent and I was advising someone coming out of prep, I would not say, "Hey, jump right to college." Because one thing I do
Right.
hear from a lot of kids is the jump from prep to the USHL is so much harder than the jump
It
from the
is.
USHL to college. Like the only big difference, or not the only, but the main difference between college and the USHL is the physicality. Like you're, as you said, you're going up against grown men, like no question. But the speed in the USHL is near around what college is because it's the same type of thing. Prep to USHL is a big difference because you're going up against younger kids. You're going up against some teams that don't take hockey that seriously. With some teams, not every team, but some teams, and you're going up against kids who aren't as good. Teams will have a good top line, but after that might not have the same caliber of player as you. Juniors, college, that's not the case. Every line is going to have guys as good or around or better than you. I think a lot of kids see that. I want to get into some more of the prospects. I want to get into Providence.
Let's hear it.
But first, our friends over at PrizePicks. Episodes brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on PrizePicks, where it's good to be right. Keep going with David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie. Goals, points. It seems to always work for PrizePicks. Continue to do that. PrizePicks, simple to play. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. And if you get your picks right, you cash in. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, good to be right. Anthony, I want to keep it with prospects, then we'll get to Providence. One guy that's interesting to me, I mean, there's a bunch we can get to. I don't want to go deep on each one, but like Chris Pelosi's been really interesting to me because we talk about high upside guys like Hagens and Letourneau, and Pelosi's credit, 9 goals, 15 points so far in 14 games. He's been productive. But it's that two-way game that continues to round into form with Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac is a team that is well known for producing these kinds of players. That is how you could not exist in that system without being a two-way guy, or at least trying to conform. He, to me, I remember when he got picked in the third round, I remember being like, he spent half his year in the NAHL. Like, no way. What are they doing in the third round? Turns out he's actually turned into something. And I think when you talk about projecting talent, he's someone that, as a pro is going to play, whether it's in the bottom six, whether it's in the AHL middle six, like to me, and could jump into the NHL middle six if he continues to play like this. He's someone to me that's been really intriguing this year and these past couple of years.
Yeah, no, I'm big fan of Pelosi. I got to see him a few times, and I think it was 2021 when he was with Mount St. Charles, obviously right
That's
in my
right.
backyard here in Rhode
Loud
Island. But
guy. Yep.
yeah, he's a Mountie, and his brother's a Mountie as well, Rocco. And you know, the thing about Pelosi, and I said this earlier regarding Hagens, Pelosi is a dog. Like he is a dog on a bone to get the puck, be around the puck, be around the crease. You watch him last weekend, and obviously having a hat trick's great. And 1/3 of his goals for the season have come from one game in which he had a hat trick. But aside from the goals and aside from the points, like he is everywhere on the ice. You watch him and you will see him in the defensive zone, in the neutral zone, in the attacking zone. He's behind his net, behind his opponent's nets. He is everywhere. And he is annoying to play against. He's high octane, high pressure all the time. He will be first in the forecheck. He will be first out of the zone with the breakout coming the other way, and he's the first in the scrum at the whistle. Now, in the sense of other Bruins prospects, he kind of plays that same style of Trevor Kuntar, who we saw at BC as well, but he is a bit more high end of a player. Like he's got the athleticism, the agility, he's got the skating, he's got the frame, and he's got the mentality. Like he does not shy away from anything. He wants the puck on his stick. He wants to shoot it. He wants to carry it. He wants to pass it to his teammates. And he wants to cause an absolute nightmare for defenders in front of the net. If you're a goalie, I feel real bad if you're playing against Pelosi. If you're a defenseman, good luck, man. Like, good luck. Um, and you're right. Like, he's starting to look like a player that has more upside than, the kind of Riley Duran type bottom six guy that we are looking at, in that mold of guys who play that style. Someone like Duran, you're looking at, oh, he could be a fourth line guy, utility player. And, you know, now you're looking at Pelosi like, wow, he might actually have some middle six upside to him there in the NHL because he can pass, he can shoot, he can hit, and he can score. And we're seeing that. I mean, we saw it last year too. He was no slouch last year. And he was a freshman. I think you look at Pelosi as a guy that maybe after, this year, if he continues to be a point per game player, maybe he's going to Providence on a PTO or ATO, whatever it's classified as, and maybe he goes that Trent Frederick route, like we saw where, he stepped into, Wisconsin and he became a top six player, like right out of the gate. And now we're seeing that with Pelosi. This year, he's been fantastic. He is one of the hardest players to play against in the NCAA, if you ask me. Um, he should be on your radar if he's not, and I really suggest just going to watch him. He's obviously playing in a pretty big Eastern Conference school there in Quinnipiac, and I know it's not Hockey East, but ECAC hockey is still pretty competitive, and he's definitely competing every night. Big fan of him, and I'm interested to see what goes on from there.
He is. And I think it goes back to as a whole, and I think you go down these prospects, Hagens, Letourneau, Pelosi, Zellers is having a really good year so far, 7 goals.
Fantastic.
Simpson's tearing it up in the USHL with Youngstown, which is a legit thing because he's coming from Minnesota high school hockey, which is really good, but still, that's a big jump going from Minnesota high school to USHL. Vashik Blanar has been interesting. There are other good prospects. Ryan Walsh is having a really good year. I always love shouting him out because I think he plays the right way, and I think he's a likable guy. I've had him on the show a
He's a
couple of times. I've
bulldog.
gotten to know him. Yeah, bulldog, really good guy, and someone that I think could be a good pro down the road, whether it's in the AHL or the NHL. But prospect rankings always come out every year. The Athletic, Sports, and everybody does prospect rankings, and the Bruins, as you know, have always, typically, the last 5 to 10 years, have been near the bottom or at the bottom.
Have they been? I haven't heard that, actually.
I don't know. Have they been? I can't tell. Now they have some high-end guys. Now you have your Hagenses, you have your Letourneaus, you have your Will Zellers. Will Moore as well. He's someone that we haven't mentioned. He's been at BC too. Um, where do you put them in the? Not, I don't need an exact like number 15. Where in amongst the 32 teams would you put the Bruins prospect wise, or how much have they improved? Do you think?
I think they've improved tenfold. I mean, the Hagens pick alone, if you ask me, that bumps them up quite a bit. I mean, now you actually have, and let's put it this way: if Hagens went, third overall to Chicago, like I don't think a lot of teams would have batted an eye at that. I don't think a lot of outlets would have batted an eye at that. I think they would have said, "Hey, this is where this kid's been projected the whole time. This is where he was slated to go. He's a third overall quality prospect." So I think you have to look at the quality of prospect you got instead of like where he fell. And for me, that's a top three quality prospect in any draft year. And for Hagens, he fell to seventh, and he's already shown like he still has those elite kind of tools that get a player into the top three. But I digress from that. Um, Hagens alone definitely bumps you up. And if you're talking about a team that's in the 27, 28, 29 range, that to me already gets you into the low 20s, right? That gets you into the 22, 23 kind of territory. Now, Letourneau kind of taking big steps and much bigger steps than anyone anticipated. If you asked anyone last year, they'd probably be happy if he ended this year with 15 points, 20 points. Now it looks like he's going to be well past that. A lot of time passes throughout this season, and maybe we look back and say, oh well, he fell off, he 16 points and whatever. So now it's looking like Letourneau is going to be more of a point per game type guy in his second year. That's a big talent increase as well. So now you add him into the fold. Will Zellers, the USHL scorer of the year, player of the year, offensive player of the year, won all these accolades, shooting up the list as well, and going into a freshman season at North Dakota, which is another pro style system there that they play. Especially being the NCHC in their division. Now you're getting into the territory of, I think, probably ranked 16 to 18 to 19-ish, somewhere around there. I'd say probably 16 to 20 range. Um, like you said, you got Hagens, Letourneau, Zellers, Cooper Simpson, who is second in points in the USHL. And I know the USHL is kind of in a transition year with the changes between the CHL and the NCAA and whatnot, but it's still a tough league to play in. It's not easy. It's definitely not easy for someone like you were saying earlier who jumped from high school to USHL and is already, there's a difference between putting up points and putting up points with kind of the swagger and confidence that he is. And to me, that's what makes him a top prospect in the system is he's beating guys any which way you can imagine. One time passing, playmaking, skating into the zone. He's very good at zone entries, and we kind of saw that in, Buffalo when he was playing in the Prospect Challenge. Very efficient at zone entries, and he's doing that already in the USHL, and he's a go-to guy for his team. Now you also have Will Moore that you mentioned too. This time last year, Will Moore was projected to be a top 15 pick in the draft roughly, and he
When
fell
I
in.
was when I was looking ahead at 24 the year before, he was someone that was talked about in those early rankings as like a top 15
Yep,
prospect. And things change, obviously. New prospects come about. You dive deeper into the class when it's
yep.
their actual time to be drafted. But still, a kid who like going into his draft year was like a first round candidate, 100%.
Yeah, and a lot of that too, and you can chalk that up to the NTDP had a down year. Like they were a mess on a lot of nights, and we talked about this the last time. I was on your show. Like they were just out of whack. Like a lot of nights, the effort wasn't there. It wasn't the same kind of standard of compete that you expect from the US NTDP, and Moore was also part of that. Like there were nights where he was indifferent, and something that just a quick caveat on him, like something that I've noticed that is following him at times, and I think he'll kind of work through is from last year at the NCDP. If you're watching him, he was very good at getting pucks out of the zone and then getting to center ice and kind of being along the walls, whether it's on the side of the penalty bench or the opposite side. He was waiting a while for his teammates to catch up to him, and then having it set in his mind that he was going to make that pass regardless of if a defender got back and it'd be intercepted or it'd be, kind of picked off easily because he's waiting for a winger to come and, catch up to the play and he's standing there and he's pretty good at protecting the puck a lot like Charlie Coyle was, where if you go and pressure him, he's going to deke around you or he's going to deceive you and he's going to get the puck in or go around you and skate with it. That's something that I see this year too at BC that I think he's not struggling with, but it's something he's got to work through and kind of get that tempo more, you know, align with the rest of the players around him. So the talent itself for Moore is right there. Like that's a top 30 player in a draft year, I think, if you're watching him. And I said as much, like when he got drafted, the Bruins got very good value there, and you obviously know it from watching him. Like that was a surefire first round pick. He fell because of compete issues and questions around, um, maybe consistency and ceiling and what the program was able to do last year. And again, that's someone that I think in this new wave of Bruins prospects that you kind of look past the guys that I know you want to get into in Providence. He's part of that new wave, and I think that's the kind of value pick that the Bruins kind of, you know, missed out on in previous years, like guys who were projected to go higher and fell, they kind of let those guys keep falling. This time around, they got him. And he's already a contributor for BC in a lot of ways, and he looks like a pretty skilled player, and he stands out. So if you're looking at their rankings and what a addition like a Moore kind of does to you, it adds you a, top 45, top 30 quality prospect at 60 overall. And who knows? Like maybe he's part of that next top 9 forward group that steps in for Boston. But, he's another guy that if you look at, another team that, let's say, Vancouver or someone took him at 28th overall or whatever team had, 28th or 29th overall, you probably wouldn't have batted an eye. You would have been like, oh, you know what? He was in the conversation the whole time, right? So
Yep.
for me, the Bruins have been the last 2 years doing very well in the draft in terms of that, taking more of those skilled kind of two-way mold guys that lean more towards the skill side of things instead of just size and two-way ability. And now they have to figure out the offensive driving consistently, but they have that ability. So I would say to answer your ultimate question, somewhere in the 16 to 20 range, and I think that is a drastic jump.
I completely agree with you on where they are. I'm the same, in the exact same area. Like that, I think it's telling that, and it really goes back to the deadline last year with all the moves they made, getting Zellers, getting Fraser Mitten as well. I know he's in Boston now, but he was a part of the prospect pool entering this year. Draft picks they acquired, getting this, ending up with the 7th overall pick. And I think the good news for the Bruins is like, it's not like, 16 or 17 is your cap because you're making more. You're going to have 2 firsts this year, most likely. You're probably going to
Yeah.
have more picks that you might acquire later in the draft if you trade a guy like Arvidsson. So, like, that's another potential pick. And, like, you're going to have picks these next couple of years. Your prospect ranking should go higher. You should not end up
Yeah.
just staying at 16 or 17. You should get into the 11, 12 range, maybe even into the top 10 if you draft well enough. And I think the biggest thing for them is like, all right, we mentioned a ton of forwards here, not a lot of D. I like Elliot Grenwald at Quinnipiac, but outside of him and Blenar's a defenseman too, right? Blenar's the
Yeah.
project defenseman, 6'5". So that's
Liam
fine
Pedersen
too.
as well.
Liam Pedersen, but like I think you do have to spend an early pick, hopefully the first or one of the firsts, on preferably a bigger right shot defenseman. But that's a
Yeah.
conversation
The,
I'll save
right.
for
And,
another
and
day.
it depends who's available. But to your point as well, like they got 7th overall last year. Even if they continue to, you know, eh, vastly, and I just want to emphasize this for anyone listening, vastly overperform their underlying metrics for where they should be this year, which I don't think they will. Sorry to be rainmaker
Oh,
for everyone,
oh,
but they might end up with that pick anyways from Toronto. So I don't know if they might have that opportunity to pick or do what the Islanders did last year outside of the first overall pick, where you get 2 mid-teens pick and you take 2 other very good prospects. So they might be in line for that again, and then you got the floor to pick again. So you got what, 5 first round picks in the next 3 years? Like that's goes a long way.
It does. And even if this year, if you end up with 2 picks between 10 and 20, you take that. You can package those, move
Absolutely.
up, you can trade them, but also like 2 high-end players. You'll take that every single time, and they could certainly
Yeah.
use it. I
It's a
want to
numbers
dive into
game at that point.
Providence. It is. It is. I want to dive into Providence real quick, but first, make sure to go subscribe to Bruins Ringside on YouTube. We're doing these all the time, usually live. Anthony always tunes in, which I appreciate. Jumps in with his commentary from Twitter
Someone has to.
or YouTube. Someone has to. Someone has to bring order to the comment section. But this one is just recorded. Anthony, we'll have you on a live one at some point because we can get the people interacting with you, which I think will be good. And then obviously, if you don't like watching us or if you're driving, please don't watch us while driving. You can just listen.
Yeah,
Apple
don't do that.
Podcasts, Spotify. Yeah, please don't do that. Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts from. And then there's lots of other great stuff at CLNS too. Celtics All Access, Patriots Press Pass. Those channels are rolling. Providence. A lot of guys actually having pretty good years, but I want to focus on someone that's been struggling so far. Matt Poitras, 8 points, 16 games, 1 goal, -2. You watch Providence quite a bit, a lot more than I do. What's going on with him? What's going on with that whole situation?
It's interesting. And again, I don't want to be someone that and anyone who's listening to me, even my biggest critics, me as a guy who doesn't get too low on things, right? I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to be, a Debbie Downer. And I think something that is mildly concerning though is, are the Bruins and the Providence Bruins in a position to develop skilled forwards versus just the two-way grinders? And on one hand, you can say, well, it's on the player, right? Like Poitras has to go down there and he has to be that assertive player. He has to earn it. He has to be, the gritty player, and he has to show us that he can do that. But on the flip side of that, on the other hand, it's like, if you're not putting Matt Poitras in a position to focus on his game and play his game and be that skilled player that we saw in Guelph, in Boston when he made the team at 19, as a top 9 center already, are you putting him in the position to succeed and develop to his strengths? And I'm not sure they're doing that well right now. And, you know, on the surface, you look at what you just said, and 14 points. I mean, 14 games, 8 points, or 13, whatever it is. That doesn't sound bad. But then you look at his game log, and the second game of the season, he got half of his points, which is 4, from one game against Cleveland. So that was a month and a half ago. So since then, he has 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points
Yeah, not
in
much. It's not
14
much.
games. That's tough. And, you look at him, and again, like, this is where the eye test comes in, right? And I know everyone listening to this in the year of 2025, all the eye tests. Well, it's important for a lot of reasons. One, it shows you what the player's doing away from the puck. It shows you if, he only has 4 points because he's nowhere to be found in the play. He's lagging behind. He's all over the map. He can't handle the puck. He can't shoot. He can't score. He can't pass. Or is he setting up his line mates and, they're not connecting? Are
Like
they,
like we talked about with Hagens.
yeah, Hagens and Stiga, are they oil and vinegar? Are they making a salad dressing, or are they just 2 parts there? And
Piss and vinegar.
right, yeah, tough scene. And that kind of lays into it, right? It's what I see with Pacha is the foot speed was never a big strength of his, right? It was always his hands, his vision, his IQ, his game processing speed. One thing that I've always said about Poitras, and you know, I'll die on this hill, is that one of his best assets and something that made him, be a top 9 NHL forward at age 19 was his ability to face the wall, pull the puck out of the wall, and get into dirty areas with it, like I was saying about Zaka earlier. He's very elusive, he's very slippery. He was very efficient at pulling pucks off the wall and skating into dangerous ice territory, whether that be in the circles or the hashes. He was good at evading forwards, taking time, opening up space, and opening up time and opportunities for his line mates, because he is somebody that you can't take the puck away from because he'll burn you if you try. And I'm not seeing enough of that in Providence. The question, which was what you asked, to start this, was what's going on with Poitras this week, or last week, shall I say, because we're recording now. Um, if you look at my Twitter feed at Bruins Network, you'll find a question that I proposed about what's going on with Poitras, with a clip of him taking a puck out of a puck battle that kind of went too long in the far corner, and he pulled it out in front of the net, got a shot off, but it was not his typical kind of speed and quickness that he did that with. And he didn't score, and it wasn't a bad play. It was a good play, actually. Like, he registered a shot on goal. He got the puck from, I think two P Bruins were on two defenders in the corner, and he got it out, being the third forward in. But I see a guy a lot of nights that he's competitive. He's finishing checks. He's going out of his way to hit. He's trying to be more abrasive, but I'm not seeing that kind of high skill, high quickness forward that we saw, even last year in the AHL. So maybe it's that he's struggling. Maybe it's that Providence as a whole isn't really scoring that much outside of, like Riley Tufte and Patrick Brown, which, like, a lot of people will say they're Providence's best forwards, and that's true. But I will say this: that's expected of them. They are 6'6". If you're Tufte, you're 6'6" and 240 pounds. If you're Patrick Brown, you're 6'2", 230 pounds. You're tanks. Like, you are grown men again who are expected to succeed in this league because you can. Like, that is your ceiling. You are AHL veteran players. That is what you do. Now, smaller players and more skilled players, they're not going to have that same success because they're not bruisers. Like, you can be bruisers in the AHL and succeed and score a lot of points. Like, look at Jeff Viel. Jeff Viel has not recorded an NHL point since Zdeno Chara was playing for the Islanders. Again, think about that. Like,
Yeah,
that's what you're
long
saying.
time.
That's what you're talking about when you say these guys are the best players. Like, yes, it's true, but that's because they can bruise their way to points in the AHL, and a lot of guys aren't going to be able to do anything about it. So Poitras isn't one of those guys. He's not a bruiser. He's not a grinder. It's the same thing that you see with Merkulov. If he's not beating you with his playmaking and his skill, he's not going to beat you bowling his way to the crease. It just doesn't work that way. So Poitras, yeah, it's a bit disappointing right now to see that, he was making it look way too easy last year. And I don't know if it's because maybe he's down on, the fact that other guys are getting opportunities that he feels he should have, or he should have, if you ask me, or if he feels like, maybe he's stuck in the mud. Maybe he feels like, after being a 41 points in 40 games last year, slightly above point per game, technically speaking. I mean, you call that point per game, it's like 1.05 or 1.02.
Yeah.
You know, maybe he's, kind of going through the motions there. But again, like, he hasn't been bad. It's just I haven't seen that same kind of confidence and swagger with the puck that I expect out of Poitras. And Providence as a whole hasn't been that great at scoring. They're kind of in the same boat that Providence is, where they're getting that Boston is, where they're getting top heavy scoring. They're getting power play points and then 5-on-5. They're not really generating all too much. If you look at the scores and the box scores, like, even Dan Lachmelis, a guy that you're looking at to kind of, have a hot start last year, and now he's falling back to earth. So maybe it's a systemic thing. Maybe it's something like that, where they're asking Poitras to work on specific parts of his game. I don't know. I haven't had those conversations with them. I'm not in the war room with Sweeney, Mujanel, and, Poitras himself. So I don't know. But I will say it is slightly concerning to see, a kind of decrease in that. And when you watch the player, it seems like at times he's focusing too much on that two-way ability. And I think you got to let Poitras be Poitras. Like, let him be that skilled, young, kind of spitfire, you know, lead with his stick and puck, and let him create the way that he creates. Like, don't try and square peg round hole him into a role that is not suited for him.
This is what worries me. So, like, Matt Poitras has a two-way ability in him. He's not like a only
It's not
skill
physical,
type young player. Yeah, he's just not physical, and he's not
and that's
amazing at
okay.
protecting himself. Yeah.
You can be a two-way defensive forward and not be. Look at Danton Heinen. Perfect example
Yes.
of a guy who A, doesn't have the best of wheels or the best speed. B, he is not physical. Well, physical in the sense of, throwing big hits like VL or Brown or, you know, Tufty or Janot, but he's very defensively reliable. And you can be that player, like you're saying.
So this is my worry. Not so much with Patra, but organizationally. Providence hasn't produced a top six forward in a while, and to their, Bruins also haven't had a lot of high picks past last year. So like, I'll give them that, but still, not producing a lot of high skill guys coming into the NHL. Fabian Lysell, that has not worked out so far. And then you have someone like Marco Sturm at the NHL level, who I think's done well so far this year, but they play a low scoring defense first. And the Bruins have always been defense first. So like, it's not just Sturm,
Right.
but physical, heavy, defensive type of hockey. That's how he wants them to play. You have all these guys like Hagens, Letourneau, Pelosi, or excuse me, not really Pelosi, but Zellers, Simpson, and you'll probably get more high end, mainly offensive guys in this upcoming draft. Are they in a position to develop these guys? Like, that's where I look at, and I'm like, I'm not, as I said, I'm like you. I'm not in the room making these decisions with these players, but are they equipped to develop these guys into contributing NHL high end top six offensive players? Like, David Pasternak's David Pastrnak. That's going to come through, arguably no matter what. But guys like Hagens, who has some holes in his game, like there are things
Yeah.
there that he needs to work on still, and there will be growing pains in the NHL. Like, I just wonder if they are equipped enough to push those guys up and push them into the best position that they can.
Yeah, no, and listen, I agree with you on that. And I'm a big defender of, the kind of Providence ethos of it's a place you go that is not a punishment, but it's a place where you go and you work on shortcomings to your game while also being in a system that mirrors Boston. Their
Completely agree.
coach mirrors
Completely agree
Boston.
with
The way that they handle their, top six group, very much so reminiscent of Boston. They use Patrick Brown as that Bergeron role down there of being the do all, be all forward, and that's great. But like you're saying, you can't have this cookie cutter mentality anymore because you're not only drafting, Trent Fredericks and Jack Stagnikas and Johnny Beechers anymore. You're drafting guys who have different toolkits for different reasons. Will Zellers is more in that kind of Brad Marchand, Connor Garland mold of like a, smaller, smaller frame, higher skill, high shot, high pace player. And it's like you can't expect to turn him into a two-way bruiser. Like you can't do that. You can't expect a grinder. You can't expect James Hagens to be turned into a Fraser Minton, like you can't do that. And you have to put these guys in positions to succeed, and you have to let them play their game, even if it means giving up some opportunities the other way that you don't want to give up. Like, trust in your defense, trust in your system, and trust in your goaltenders, right? Like, if that's what you're preaching in Boston, and you're still going to sign and acquire these guys like Tanner Jeannot, you're going to acquire Fraser Minton, you're going to acquire a Merit Husnandinov, who is the best of both worlds there. It's kind of like a Fraser Minton and James Hagens hybrid type of style player. Like, if you're going to have those guys who are responsible and reliable, you can afford to put the Hagens in, you can afford to put the Poitras in, even the Lysells. Like, if you're Fabian Lysell in Providence right now, right? What are you thinking? Like, are you thinking that you're going to get an opportunity in Boston to play your game, or are you thinking that you're going to have to conform to what this system wants you to be, um, conform to this system that it wants you to be, like,
Well, I would
of
say
some
Fabian
retro system?
Lysell's probably thinking, I'm not even getting a shot in Boston. Like,
Yeah,
I'm not,
right. No, he's
let alone
thinking,
playing my game. I'm not
yeah,
going up there.
yeah, he's thinking, I gotta go hit someone, and it's like
Yeah.
you have to start wondering. And like you said, like, to their credit, they haven't had the opportunity to draft too many high skilled players because they're usually off the board. But Lysell's a good example of that because he fell to them. Everyone knows what Lysell was the day of the draft. He was slated to go top 15 at the lowest. and he fell to you at 21st. So you know what he is, you know what his ceiling is, and now you're asking him to be something that he's not. I think, anyways, I think that's what you're kind of doing. So it's a very fair and valid question to ask of, is the coach in Providence the right guy for that? Is the development staff the right guy? Is the skills and puck coach the right guy down there? And it's great that guys like Adam Quaid and Chris Kelly are in the organization, but you look at them, they were never those guys.
Mhm.
One was a stay-at-home defenseman, one was a third line center that, if you're Fraser Minton, you should be happy to learn from, because that's kind of like almost a one-to-one of what you should be, right? Or what you hope to be or aspire to be. Like a prime 20-goal Chris Kelly, right? That
Yep.
one year that he did that, before
Still
Chiarelli
though,
gave him
still
a.
though, like what I will say though is that you can have been a stay-at-home defenseman or a third line center and still be able to produce high-end
Absolutely.
guys. I mean, those are
Yep,
smart guys, and
1000%. Yep.
for sure. And I'll even say like I like this hire a lot, and I like he coached at Cushing. Ryan Bork. I said this to you the other day.
Mhm.
Like Ryan Bork was at the national program. Ryan Bork has coached some high-end guys. Everybody I've talked to has
Best
said
coach
that
James
guy thinks.
Hagens.
That's right. His coach, James Hagens, like everyone I've talked to said that guy thinks the game on a different level and is able to teach it
Absolutely.
really, really well. That can get a Division 1 commit to buy into it, or a kid who's just at Cushing for 4 years and then going to move on to regular life, like him to buy into. Bork is a hire down there I like. Like Bork, I think is going to be a
I do too.
perfect fit for those types of players. But on the whole of it, I'm like, are they ready to take on what they're drafting? Because I'm with you. I like the way they're drafting. It's just that next wave of like, now, can they get those guys to that level? That's the
Yeah,
part
and
that I think
and
is worth
you know, I,
questioning.
I yeah, I agree, and I don't want it to come off as me saying, like, McQuaid and Chris Kelly are bad in their roles. They're good in their roles. But my point is, that old Einstein quote, right? Or whoever it was, Ben Franklin. I don't know. I'm not a history buff,
One of
but
those
if
guys.
if you yeah, one of those old dudes. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you're gonna think it's stupid, right? So you can't keep this mindset of, the guys like Poitras and Lysell need to be two-way, gritty forwards, where they have to play, north-south hockey along the wall, and they have to only win their puck battles. You got to find a role, and you got to sometimes create a role for a player that is going to be utilized differently. Like, you have to think a little forwardly with them. Sometimes in Boston, that looks like putting Mason Lohrei on, the third pair and allowing him to have those, defensive holes in his game, but he moves the puck so well and he can run a power play, so you got to create a role for him. You got to start thinking about that, I think, in the big picture, like you're saying, with guys like Hagens, Zellers, Simpson, even someone like Letourneau. If you're expecting Letourneau to be, this big, burly, two-way, you know, Minton in your face type player, you might be disappointed, and you got to let him be his player. Just like you got to let Lysell play his game if you're going to give him a shot. Poitras, those guys, I think as a whole, I'm not overly concerned with Matt Poitras, but yeah, I am a little concerned, like you were saying, about wondering what's going on in Providence, and wondering if the vision is kind of, something that needs to be reassessed. So we'll see. I'm not too sure, but it's still early in the season.
One thing I like from I don't want to say modern day coaches, because I think this has always kind of been around, but it feels like it's more around now, is letting players be themselves. Letting them be them on the ice, letting them play their game. You even heard this up in Boston recently with Hustendinov down the middle, and Pastrnak was like, "No, I want him to. I will work with him. He can do whatever he needs to do. I will work off his game. That is totally fine." Like, I think that's the right mindset to have, and I think for a long time the Bruins have had that two-way, gritty, big bad Bruins kind of mindset. And look, they won a lot. Like they were not unsuccessful. I know they only have one cup in the
No,
last, a bunch of years, but like they're on the doorstep. But I think the game has changed. It's more of a speed and skill game than ever before. And I think you have guys now in your prospect pool who fit that mold. You got to let them be that. And I think that's something
absolutely.
that hopefully they take into account coming up soon.
Yeah.
Anthony, what can people look forward to from you? Bruins Network, Twitter. What should people be looking out for?
Just more clips about guys. doing something, doing a lot of nothing, somewhere in between, score and assists. In terms of the do nothing part that I mentioned, sometimes I post some clips that are more about the details of the game. So if you're looking for some more in-depth analysis versus just, hey, this guy scored, this guy got an assist, follow me at Bruins Network on Twitter and tune into what I'm cooking up there for clips.
You should. There are lots of times I'll be like, "Oh, I didn't see that. That's interesting." Because I'll text you and I'll be like, "You're just watching this game at 9 a.m." and you're like, "Damn right I am." I'm like,
Unfortunately,
hell yeah, hell yeah, I love
it's
that.
right here.
That's perfect for me. Well, Anthony, this has been fun. This has been fun. That's Anthony, Bruins Network. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners have a great rest of your week.